Hey guys, I'm the Comics Kid 2099 and I wanted to talk to you guys about a book that I finished reading yesterday, Challengers of the Unknown Must Die. This is by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. They are the creative team of all these books that you see on the back, as well as several books from Marvel like Spider-Man Blue, Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Gray. They may have done some others, but those are the main ones. This book, I really wasn't sure what to expect when I went into it. If you will recall, a few weeks ago, actually this was well over a year ago actually, I did a review on another Challengers of the Unknown book by Howard Chaykin, and I hated it. It was one of the worst things that I had ever read in my entire life. It was awful. So I went into this not really sure if this was going to be along those lines, because Jeph Loeb, to be kind about it, he has written some really awful stuff in the past. So I wasn't sure if this was going to be along the level of Challengers of the Unknown, Stolen Moments, Borrowed Time, which was the Howard Chaykin miniseries that came out probably about 15 years after this one, or if this was going to be a little bit better. And I want to say it is better, but this is not necessarily a great book, or even necessarily a good book. I would say this falls around okay. Now, I read a review of this book after I finished reading the book itself, and the guy who reviewed it, he talked about a lot of the stuff that he really liked about the book, and it was strange. Everything that he mentioned about the book was stuff that I personally did not like about the book. He really liked that for the middle portion of this book, almost half of the book, all of the Challengers of the Unknown are kind of scattered to the four winds and they're all doing their own thing. I personally did not like that. If I buy a book called Challengers of the Unknown, I want to see them as a team working together. I have this phrase that I talk about when I'm reading the Fantastic Four. I want the Fantastic Four to be the Fantastic Four, not four Fantastic Ones. And that kind of applies here. And of course, you may or may not know that the Challengers of the Unknown are actually a precursor to the Fantastic Four. They were created by Jack Kirby about 6 years before the Fantastic Four were created, and they are very similar. The Fantastic Four had purple jumpsuits. The Fantastic Four originally had purple jumpsuits. There were 5 members of the Challengers of the Unknown when they were first debuted, or actually 4, I think, but then 2 of the characters are kind of, if you combine them, they're very much kind of like Reed Richards, and then the other 2 are very similar to Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm, and then later on they added another character named June, and she was kind of the Sue Storm of the Challengers of the Unknown. And this is, in a way, you could read this sort of, this isn't really similar to the Fantastic Four. Early Challenger stuff from like the 50s and 60s, if you read that stuff, that is very similar to the Fantastic Four. But by this point, it was really, if they were ever going to mention anything like, wow, look at those 4 fantastic individuals, it was really just a punchline. By this point, the characters and the team were not really similar to the Fantastic Four. And one problem with the Challengers of the Unknown is that they never did take off in the same way that the Fantastic Four did. You can, anybody, you don't even necessarily have to have read any Fantastic Four, and you probably know the general personalities of the 4 members of the Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, that is not something that you can say about the Challengers of the Unknown. Before I went into this, I really didn't know anything about the Challengers of the Unknown. Of course, I've only read one other Challengers of the Unknown story, and that one had an entirely different group of characters. And I was kind of going into this, like I said, I didn't really know what to expect, and I wanted it to tell me who the Challengers of the Unknown were. And unfortunately, I don't really think it did a very good job of doing that. By the end of the book, I think it does do a good job of kind of showing you who these people are, but I think it doesn't really show you who they were back in their original series. I think really what Jeph Loeb is doing here, he is painting you a picture. He's showing you, you know, this is Ace Morgan, or Kyle Morgan as he's called here, and then that's Red. That's Red right there. And, like, he's giving you a good idea of who these characters are, but unfortunately he's basically just wiping the slate clean and giving these characters entirely new personalities. For example, Ace right here, he was their ace pilot. He was the pilot of the group. But in this book, out of nowhere, he's an occultist. He's interested in the occult, and basically throughout this entire book, he is training to become a sorcerer. And that was never anything that was involved with the Challengers of the Unknown before. That character was never in any way involved with magic or the occult or anything like that. And really, this whole book is like that, where all of these characters, Jeff Loeb is giving them different personality quirks, or he's having them be interested in certain things, like the occult, or he makes one of them into an alcoholic, he makes one of them into a mercenary slash vigilante. And none of these characters had anything even kind of like that in their original comics. So while by the end of the book, I will say that Jeff Loeb does do a good job of distinguishing all of these characters, and that was something I had a problem with at the beginning. For the first 2 or 3 issues, I had a hard time telling each of these guys apart. They all just kind of were members of the Challengers of the Unknown, and they really just kind of blurred together for me, and I couldn't really tell each of them apart. I couldn't remember which name went with which character. By the end of the book, I think that Loeb does a better job of distinguishing them, but I don't really think that I'm 99% certain that he didn't do his research here. He did not go back to the original Challengers of the Unknown stuff and kind of take the personalities and character traits from that comic and then extrapolate from them. Basically, he is acting like none of the Challengers of the Unknown stuff that came before really matters, and he's just creating brand new characters to have those names of the original characters, if that makes any sense. And so that bothered me a little bit. Even though I've never read any Challengers of the Unknown, it still bothered me. I would prefer Loeb to kind of work with what was already there instead of just erasing it all and creating something new. That would be like if he just suddenly jumped on Batman and pretended like nothing had happened before, and then he gives Batman an entirely new personality, and then he gives Robin an entirely new personality. It would be kind of like that, and so that bothered me a little bit. Tim Sale's art is absolutely gorgeous, and it always is. But I would actually say here, this is like one of his earlier works. He had done some stuff before, but nothing really huge. He had worked on Grindel before. I'm a big fan of Grindel. But this was his first big project for Marvel or DC. And he does some really interesting experimental stuff here that I've never seen him do elsewhere. You know, he's done a lot of the stuff here, like Superman for All Seasons. He did 3 different Batman stories and a Catwoman story. With those, his art is very good, but it's also very traditional. It's just very normal. You know, the panel moves in the same way. The panel distribution is kind of set up in the same way that it always is in any comic book. But here, there's one particular double spread page that is absolutely beautiful to look at, and it just blows my mind. And there's a foreword at the beginning of this book where Bendis talks about it a little bit, and he talks about how he really likes it. This double spread page is like a Monopoly board, like the board game Monopoly, and it shows a couple of the characters from the story walking around the board. And that's really interesting and very experimental. And this book is probably the most experimental book that Tim Sale has ever done, and I think it's maybe my favorite that Tim Sale has ever done. I really like the artwork in The Long Halloween and everything else that he's done that I've seen, but this is probably the one where he's having the most fun experimenting with the format, kind of doing stuff that you don't ever see in any other comic book. And for that, I would say the artwork here is much better than the story itself. As far as outside of Jeff Loeb basically just assigning brand new character traits to all of the members of the Challengers of the Unknown, what is the story here? Basically, their headquarters, Challenger Mountain, gets blown up. Oh, by the way, spoilers here. Sorry if that was a spoiler for you. So spoilers, my thumb is going up, and as long as my thumb is up, I'm spoiling. Challenger Mountain gets blown up, like I said, and then in issue 2, they are put on trial because everyone thinks that they blew up the mountain. And basically, they are proven innocent, but the jury wants to suggest that they retire and that they no longer act as the Challengers of the Unknown. And that's why for like 5 issues of this entire miniseries, they're all off doing their own thing. And that's easily my least favorite part of the story. I much more enjoy it when they're all working together, because that's what I wanted when I went into this book. And then at the end of the book, for the last couple of issues, they join forces again to fight an evil demon that was released whenever Challenger Mountain exploded. And this evil demon is basically encouraging all people across the world to just act mean, kind of like the slime from Ghostbusters 2, sort of. And it's an okay story. It's not going to change hearts and minds. It's just a story that's there. It's not really awful. This is not on the level of, say, anything that Jeff Loeb did for the Ultimate Universe, like Ultimatum or anything like that. This is not that bad. And for people who think that The Long Halloween is one of the greatest stories of all time, I personally disagree. I don't think it's that good of a story. But people who really like that story, this is not going to be on that level for them. So that's my thoughts on this book. I don't really have a whole lot else to say. It's a very interesting book. This is hands down 100 times better than the Howard Chaykin miniseries. Even with all of my problems here, this is much better than that miniseries. So if you are wanting to get into the Challengers of the Unknown, I almost said the Fantastic Four. If you are wanting to get into the Challengers of the Unknown, maybe give this a shot, but keep in mind, this isn't going to give you the Challengers as you want to see them. If you, for example, if you read the New Frontier storyline by Darwyn Cooke, or if you saw the animated movie based on that storyline, and you saw the Challengers of the Unknown in that story, and you're like, I want to know who those guys are. I want to read some of their stories. This would be an okay place to start. This would not be the best place to start. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of other places to start. There's the archives, which collects some of their original stories, but I haven't looked into that. I'm pretty sure those archives would be a little pricey, maybe even very pricey. I don't know. I haven't looked those up to see how much they are, but if you want the original stories, that would probably be the best place to go for the Challengers of the Unknown working together as a team, which is what I wanted to see, and that I didn't get that here, and that's part of the reason why I didn't like this book as much as I kind of wish I had. But this book isn't as bad as I thought it would be. I thought it would be just astoundingly awful, and fortunately, it wasn't. So that's my thoughts on this book. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope I was able to help you decide if you're going to buy this book or not. And that's all I have to say today. So I will see you guys later in the week with a different kind of video. Catch you later.